Hello, everybody, and welcome to Feeling Seen, the podcast that talks about the movies that make us feel seen. Today's co-host is an actor who's currently starring on the Apple TV Plus series For All Mankind, which will have its Season 3 premiere this June. She also hosts the show's official companion podcast. She has brought us a fascinating trio of characters to discuss today. Kate Winslet's Clementine from Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, a millennial tentpole, Diane Keaton's titular Annie Hall, and Bjork's Selma from, wait for it, Dancer in the Dark. Gear up, ladies and gentlemen. Why those three characters? That's the kind of question we live for here at Feeling Seen. So look forward to that in just a moment. And then afterwards, as you know, at the very end, I will have one quick thing to say. And this time, I'm going to say it about The Northman, which is now playing in theaters and I'm thrilled about. So let's stick around for a bit of chatter about The Northman after. But that's all the preamble that I've got for you today. Let's get to my conversation with Krys Marshall. Krys Marshall.
Hi, Jordan.
Hello. You might know her from For All Mankind, where she plays the vaunted astronaut Danielle Poole. And I suppose I should make sure to say that For All Mankind, your show, it's essentially sort of an alternative, like, future past of, like, what would have happened if the Russians had, like, matched the United States in the space race.
Yep.
And that space race had continued in earnest intensely after, like, it's not just like, America, we made it to the moon, we did it, huzzah, we were in the space race, but that competition stayed in place. And the sort of fruits of that scientific discovery and exploration, if that had happened. Is that accurate to say?
That's more accurate than I've ever said it. Thank you, Jordan. I hope I can write that down and use it later and claim it.
No, feel free. Public domain. And who is Danielle character for the folks at home in the For All Mankind story?
Danielle Poole is the black female astronaut in the early class of this group of female astronauts who the president says, okay, you know, the Russians beat us to the moon. Let's beat them by putting a woman up there. And so like you just said, the space race continues. So initially, Danielle is brought into our world as a token, which is not that far off from my experience as a black woman living and working in Hollywood, you know? And it's tough, you know, because you have to say to yourself, is my pride in knowing that I'm here to serve this sort of purpose, is my pride going to inhibit the fact that I'm still in this room?
Yeah.
I'm still at this table. I'm still able to tell this part of the story. And can I set that pride aside to just be excited and joyful that I have this opportunity? And so we're watching Danielle kind of find her way in this environment where she's sort of second fiddle in a lot of ways. You know, I think she's trying to assert herself without being too domineering, and she's trying to be polite without being a pushover. And so, you know, hopefully your audience will have a chance to watch the show. I won't give away too much from the show, but
Your third season is what's coming up.
Exactly, our third season is what's coming up. But the crazy thing about our show is that the audience is still finding it along the way. You know, I think that's sort of different from network TV versus streaming is folks oftentimes don't find a show until 2 or 3 seasons in. I mean, I just finished Ozark. I'm like one of those people who hadn't ever seen Ozark until about 4 weeks ago.
I think
and then housed it in the course of a month.
I remember I don't remember if it was season 3 or season 4 of Ozark when suddenly I started hearing about Ozark all of the time. And then I was like, wait, we're multiple seasons into the show that suddenly everybody is all over? That totally makes sense. Yeah.
So Danielle is finding her way. And then the same is occurring through season 2 where she's beginning to realize, like, there are external pressures on me for being the female astronaut, being the black female astronaut. But I also recognize that I have responsibilities to myself. I have responsibilities to my family, and I am going to be the best damn astronaut I can be, and I'm not going to let your limitations on who you think I am get in my way. And so at the end of season 2, we see her really kind of break out of the mold of trying to be the good girl and instead just doing what's right.
Well, okay, now that we have a foundation of the character that you are currently playing in this show, I will segue us into what brings us here today, which is the characters you have brought for us to discuss.
Yes.
Which are sort of an antecedent representative characters for you. And this is the richest of tapestries. You
Oh,
presented
good!
multiple options. We have Clementine, correct, from Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Selma, Bjork's Selma from Dancer in the Dark.
Great movie.
Gird your emotions. And Diane Keaton's titular Annie Hall in Annie Hall. And I have obviously been thinking a lot about what I see as the connective tissue between these three characters. But
Weirdos.
do you think of them as having a through line to them, or do you feel like they are representative of separate things that resonated for you?
Oh, God. I mean, I think that for me, they all ring the same bell of being really young and not realizing that it was okay to be a freak. I grew up in the South, and I was not cool. I had crooked teeth. I was goofy. I was skinny when skinny wasn't cool. And no boys noticed me or liked me, and I couldn't have been less of a nerd. And on top of all that, I was into theater. I mean, come on.
Right, yeah.
It's like covering yourself in Raid, you know. So I remember just being really like enthralled by movies and TV shows, which makes sense that I went on to be an actor. And I'll start with Annie Hall, because I think that might have been one of the earlier movies that I saw as a kid. We had HBO, and I think that it played on HBO. And I remember just seeing Diane Keaton's character and thinking, she's like me. Obviously, I'm not a 5'10" white woman, but she's like me in the sense that she's so nervous and so awkward and kind of like fumbling and anxious and self-deprecating, but highly intelligent and almost like a wee bit on the spectrum. And she found love.
Oh, God, what a dumb thing to say, right? I mean, you say it, you play well, and then right away I have to say you play well. Oh, God, Annie. Well, la-di-da, la-di-da, la-la, yeah.
And when I was young, I mean, even into my early 20s, I always just assumed I'll be a creative and maybe someday I'll, pen a book of poetry, but I'll probably never find love because I'm a total fucking weirdo.
Okay.
And I think a lot of women probably have that experience where you start to kind of pigeonhole yourself and say, if I don't behave in this way, or if I don't dress this sort of way, or if I'm not the ideal of what I imagine society to be a woman and what makes a woman sexy, then I just won't find love. And I kind of resign myself to that. And so being young, I was probably like 12, and seeing Annie Hall and just thinking like, I love that she's sort of like toes the line between masculine and feminine in the way that she dresses. I love that she is so unapologetically herself.
Yeah.
I was hesitant, Jordan. I'm going to be full disclosure here.
Please.
Hesitant to talk about Annie Hall because of the fact that Woody Allen is a rapist.
Yeah. Woody Allen's a sex predator.
Let's just call it what it is. But I'm also having to reconcile in my mind that there are really incredibly talented women throughout the history of film who've made remarkable performances with men who are pieces of shit. And so if we are going to condemn every movie made by Woody Allen, Roman Polanski, Harvey Weinstein, you name it, there'll be no movies left. So I think it would be unfair to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So the movie means a lot to me, and Annie and her sort of joie de vivre and her ability to just kind of like recklessly live and love and fall miserably and then try again. I just think is really beautiful, and I'm not going to let Woody Allen and his behavior steal that joy from her.
Well, yeah, and there is, you look at that style that was pioneered by Diane Keaton that she has really like sort of refined and stayed in the ballpark of like aesthetically her entire life. Like you look at that now and like that's some kind of like cool queer shit that she was doing at the time. You look at like this beautiful, delicate Diane Keaton with this sort of like cute mask thing that she's pulling off in the movie, and I would like to think of that as like a touch point for queers across the generations
Hell
to,
yeah.
to see this like play with dress and feel inspired to embody that in their
There's a
lives.
reason why at 12 it meant a lot to me, because I was like, what am I feeling? What is this warmth in my loins? I don't know. So yeah, absolutely. I think that she, Diane Keaton's never spoken about that aspect of her life, but whether she likes it or not, it's just like
it belongs to
Kate
all of us
Blanchett,
now.
right? It's like, you are the queer flag, honey, whether you like it or not. So deal with it. I think she's fine with it.
Yeah, I don't think you wear suits like that if you're not fine with it.
You don't toy with us, Kate. You know what you're up to.
she knows what she did. Well, and may I share with you what the through line that I was seeing through these characters?
Hit me.
I was I was watching Clementine, and I hadn't watched Eternal Sunshine in a long time, and I'd kind of forgotten just sort of how perfect Kate Winslet was in this role. Like, there's Eternal Sunshine being the story of this couple, Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet, who have gone to a medical clinic to have their memories of one another erased so they can remove the pain. But unfortunately, along with the pleasure of that time that they spent with one another in their lives. And Clementine is this sort of bombastic burst of life and color. And I had never thought of her, obviously, really in conversation with an Annie Hall. But then watching this, thinking of Annie Hall, and then going into Dancer in the Dark and seeing Bjork's performance as Selma, there seemed to be this sort of like free-spiritedness to each of the characters and a sort of reckless self-possession in the way they sort of spin through the world that people don't really know what to do with. And as such, there is sort of like this tension between sort of their purity of personality and the cynicism of the world that always seems to be sort of pressing against them. And they are never not themselves, but it always kind of feels like the world can almost be an antagonist to these sorts of characters, because there's just something so forward and feminine and, like you said, unapologetic about how they present themselves. And I was like, wow, I'm actually seeing quite clearly this little cluster of character between these three that I wouldn't have associated before. And I wanted to hear what you thought about that.
I mean, first of fucking all, you're so smart. It's annoying. Like, I am listening to you, and I'm like, how am I going to say something worth listening to after she just said all this shit?
Because your feelings matter. Because your feelings are not mine. They're yours.
Yes. Everything you just said, yes. And I'll also say, now here I go, my feminist set.
Oh,
here it comes.
Safe space.
Careful, fellas. There is something so frightening about a woman who is unpredictable. And way back in the day, those women were burned. And back before that, those women were exiled or put into forced slavery or whatever. But throughout society, and then even today, the world is always trying to find a way to put women in a box and to remind us that we need to behave in a certain way. We need to abide by societal norms. And if we don't, then we will be on the far side called, disgusting, unmarriable, etc. And on the near side called sluts and whores and, a used woman all washed up. So what you're talking about, it's hard to see, because when we were in preparation for this conversation and thinking about the movies that meant so much to me and the performances that meant so much to me, I really just went with my gut. And I looked for there to be some connective tissue, but I think maybe I'm too close to it.
Sure.
So hearing you say this, because you've got the 30,000-foot view.
That's the fun that I have with people is I get to like come in from the outside and be like, what do you think of this thing?
I love that. And I think, I sound like I'm repeating myself, but there's so much about Kate Winslet's performance as Clementine that just feels so... It feels musical in many ways.
Yeah. And Bjork as Selma is literally musical.
Exactly. But it feels very eruptive.
Yeah.
Tangent. I'm an Aquarius. Bet you didn't see that coming. I'm an Aquarius, and so I know intimately what that experience is like of being in the midst of trying to express yourself, and then you burst into tears. And of course, the moment that a woman does that, then she is discounted as emotional and hysterical, and put her in an asylum. She needs a lobotomy. So
we really should pull out her teeth to fix this. We should consult medicine.
You know what?
And pull out her teeth and probably try leeches. Because this is going too far.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So, when you watch Kate Winslet's performance in this, you can easily just say, oh, she's crazy. And so many people love to just summarize women and saying, oh, she's just crazy.
Yeah.
My ex, beautiful girl, just so crazy.
Yeah.
And if we were to interview Jim Carrey's character, let's say he were a real person, he could factually say my ex is crazy and he could be right.
Right, yeah.
However, we're also talking about Clementine, who is just a real person who's experiencing life very viscerally. The other thing, I guess I come back to this sort of, poor Krys Marshall, she's unlovable. But I think, I probably saw this movie when I was like, in my, I think I was maybe like in my freshman year in college.
Oh, perfect time to watch that movie. Wow, yeah.
Sure. And I, of course, at that point it had, numerous miniature heartbreaks that made me want to die,
yes,
right?
Of
and
course.
just like, those black and white marble notebooks just filled to the brim with, my name with this person's last name.
Yeah, people pull those out, it's serious business
exactly,
inside.
Right, exactly. And so that resounded, that it made reverberations all throughout my little young teenage bones of feeling like, gosh, if love can feel this bad and this painful, so painful that you don't even want to be alive. Is it worth having? Is it worth living? And that fear around loving so deeply and really giving over to yourself, I think it is insane. It is crazy. I don't know why people do that. I've been married for 4 years, and sometimes I look at my husband and I just think, I just want to take a buzzsaw and just cut from your throat down to your pelvis.
To make sure I did the job completely.
Right. No, not that. So I can crack open your bones, get inside your torso, and then sew it back up.
Okay.
So now we can be one person.
There we go. Let me crawl inside and sew it up from the inside.
I want to live
Let's merge.
in you. I'm so obsessed with you. And then also, sometimes I want to keep on sawing and just cut you in half and put your body in the LA River. So love is crazy.
Yeah.
Love is totally crazy. And only a society of psychopaths would ever oblige to such a crazy arrangement. And yet we do every day.
Well, one of my favorite moments in this movie is when I think they're hopping through Joel's memory. Like he's getting wiped. He's in the process of getting wiped, and Mark Ruffalo and Kirsten Dunst are having like a tryst around him while he's unconscious. And they're hopping through his memories because he's decided, we're going to hide you in different parts of my mind so they can't find you to erase you because I regret this decision intensely. And I think it's when they're in the bookstore memory that she starts yelling at him. She says, I'm not a concept, Joel. And she's just dragging him for being like, I'm not this screen on which you can project whatever you want me to be. I'm not an idea.
Too many guys think I'm a concept, or I complete them, or I'm gonna make them alive. But I'm just a fucked up girl who's looking for my own peace of mind. Don't assign me yours.
I remember that speech really well.
And what I found too from watching all three of these and like thinking along the lines of this conversation was with these three characters, they do seem to function as concepts for men in these movies. Annie is very much a concept for Woody that makes him feel better about himself. He's like something, an idea he aspires to spend time around to make himself feel better. And the light and levity and sort of chaos that comes out of Clementine is something that seems like the very dour Joel is drawn. He's drawn to her light because he feels like he is darkness. And then even in Dancer in the Dark, we have the character of Jeff, the lovely, tender Jeff, who's just repeatedly courting Selma throughout the entire movie. And even he feels this attraction to her, and he keeps trying over and over and over again to be closer to her, but she really only exists she never opens herself up to get to know him. She sort of only exists in abstract. And you have these women who are sort of so full of life in their own that they become, again, it seems like that light that these darker, more dour men can draw to. And it feels like, we have, between the two of us, I would imagine, have so many girlfriends who had men who just existed around them because they wanted to extinguish that light by suffocating it.
Sure. It's like, oh, what a beautiful thing. I hope I could snuff it out.
I mean, is that at all a part of your story? Like that sense of sort of like that light that you're like, I got to keep this burning in spite of sort of, it seems like everything around me trying to like close in and snuff it down.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, that experience of feeling like the thing that made someone draw to you is now the thing that they abhor the most. I think a lot of people can resonate with that experience. What I love about Bjork's performance in Dancer in the Dark is less so about her relationship with the men in her life and more with her relationship with her son. I am not a mom, but the idea of like truly killing for my child, sacrificing for my child, it just like puts a chill on my bones. The thought that I could love something so much that it would mean that, I mean, I have a dog who I adore, but if that is even an nth of what it's like to be a mom, which I'm hoping it will be, that's pretty intense. The other thing I love about Dancer in the Dark is, of course, the music.
I was going to ask about what your initial exposure was to Dancer in the Dark and how that the story of a Czech immigrant woman played by Bjork who has come to the United States, and we find out over the course of the movie to get, the sort of end game was to get a medical procedure for her son to prevent him from going blind from this congenital disorder that he has. And she works in a factory, and her eyesight is going. Her great passion is musical theater and song and dance. And because it is a Lars von Trier movie, and a worse and worse and worse cascading series of tragedies happen to her, leading to an ultimately tragic finale.
You're very strong.
I'm not strong. I got little games I play when it goes really hard. When I'm working in the factory. And the machines, they make these rhythms. And I just start dreaming and it all becomes music.
I think that Bjork is an amazing singer, but I think that this body of work, the album around Dancer in the Dark, to me is far and away not just her best work, but some of the best musical work I think I've ever heard. Largely because she doesn't just sing. She keens. She wails. Like, she makes a visceral noise that comes from so deep beneath her that it sounds like it's almost like hitting a note is irrelevant. If I hit a note, it is inconsequential to me because my aim is to just get this out. This intense emotional experience. And again, I probably saw this movie when I was in college. It was like during that time when you're like, oh, let's watch all those movies that were cool, and then you watch Reservoir Dogs and
things that made you feel horrible.
Exactly. It's like, oh, I'm in theater school. I'm told I'm supposed to be watching these movies. So that was one of them. And again, there is just something quite chaotic about her performance. And it's sort of the antithesis of what you would imagine an actress is supposed to be. Actresses are supposed to be beautiful. They're supposed to be thin. They're supposed to be youthful. They're supposed to be whatever. And she's just doing all those things her own way. She doesn't seem to be mindful of how her face looks or how her body moves. She's just allowing the story. She's allowing herself to be a conduit for the story.
Well, and tell me, I would like to hear from you then a bit about sort of being, finding a connection in or feeling the resonance of these characters that are kind of sort of a mess, sort of like these swirling chaos centers that like they are the beauty in their own chaos. But what is there anything to that for you? Because they're such intense characters, all three of them.
There's so much to that. I mean, I think, there's some actors who are like, I'm method, which is the reason why I beat the people I work with. And it's like, I don't know if that's method or you're just maybe a maniac. I'm definitely not in that camp. But I do like to work with actors, and I like to feel like I'm the sort of actor who allows the person I'm in the story with, the other actor, to inform what happens next. So even though I say A, you say B, I say C, you say D, we're not going to change the lines on the script supervisor. But what I think is important is, just like in this conversation, I'm feeding off of what you're giving me.
Right.
And that energy between the two of us, the 4 feet between the two of us, is kinetic. It's alive.
Yeah.
It's filled with electrons and neutrons. It's alive and real. Hi, I'm on a science show. I learned about electrons recently, and now I'm going to mention them.
You absolutely should. What is this knowledge for if not for sharing with the world?
Mitochondria, girl. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Anyhow, so yeah, I think the sort of idea of doing a canned performance that I've cooked up in my room or in my trailer and I've bottled it up and I can't wait to get to set and just pour it all over you guys. You're so lucky I've been working so hard on this lisp or this limp. Like, who cares? Yeah, work on your lisp, work on your limp. But then once you get to set, you got to kind of throw that shit out and just be present with the other folks in the scene. There are sometimes you do a scene with someone and it's almost like I could just strip butt naked and start singing Mary Had a Little Lamb, and you would not change one thing about your performance. You are stuck on you.
Right, yeah.
And that to me is just so boring. And so I think, as a young person and then later as a young actor and as a young acting student, seeing performances that felt to me just so alive, electric, like the third rail in the New York City Metro, just like, don't touch that.
Yeah.
It feels, I don't know, I'm drawn to it. And I hope to continue to be that sort of actor. And then I have good days and bad days. Some days, no matter how hard I try, I'm just like, oh God, I can't get out of my own way. But then there are moments. I mean, there's a moment in season 1 where I am having a conversation at the Outpost bar. I'm talking to Gordo and I'm talking to my husband Clayton, who's just returned from Vietnam. And it was a tough day. It was an emotional day. I'm working with Edwin Hodge is an amazing actor, incredibly talented. I'm working with Michael Dorman, who's amazing and incredible. And these guys are kicking ass left and right. And I feel like I am a human shit stain in this scene. And can the camera get off of me and back onto them? And I remember in between setups, pulling Michael Dorman to the side, and I was like, had tears in my eyes, and I was like, Michael, I am really doing bad today. I don't know what the hell is wrong with me. I love this scene. I was so excited about this scene. And, I don't know if you've ever had this experience as a kid where you're like so excited about a slumber party and then you throw up when you get there. And you're just like, damn it. I've been looking forward to this all week, Sarah. It's your birthday, but it meant a lot to me. And now I'm throwing up. My mom's going to come get me. God damn, I blew it.
I blew it.
Never get invited to another sleepover.
I know exactly what you mean.
This is now my lot in life, the girl who threw up. So here I am. I've got the yips, as my husband would say. I've got the yips. And Michael pulls me to the side, and he's like, hey, you're fine. You're doing really well. Everything you've done so far has been so good that literally everything you do from here on out is just gravy. We already have the scene.
Yeah.
And he didn't chastise me. He didn't reprimand me. He didn't say stop crying. And so I went back in there and we did the scene. And this is what I talk about with the electricity. I said to myself, I've already fucked up so much. There's nothing more I could do than to just be here and do the best I can. So we're doing the scene and it's getting really activated. And I go to stand up to grab my purse. And as I do, the table knocks and a glass falls off the table and shatters, glass everywhere. And I look at the glass and I look at Michael and I look at Edwin, and it's, for a moment, it was no longer Danielle, being in the story. Now it's Krys thinking, oh my God, I thought I couldn't ruin this day more. And now I broke a glass on set. And instead, I just looked up and I just said, God damn it. And just grabbed my purse and walked out of the scene. And that was the take that they used. Because you know what? I was frustrated. I was anxious. I was overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And also so is Danielle.
Yeah.
Danielle is so excited to see her husband. She's so excited to have her husband meet her boss. She's excited to be going to the moon.
Yeah.
And now she's just fucking everything up at this drinks. And she's knocked over
one of the most benign things she's going to do in this show about going to space.
And she's knocked this table and a glass is shattered. And then in this moment, her response is, God damn it.
Yeah.
And so I'm not encouraging actors to break glass on set. But what I am saying is that it's important to trust the process, trust the other actors in the scene. And that aliveness, I couldn't have manufactured it.
Right, yeah.
I
It could
couldn't
only
have thought
be
it through
reactive.
in the trailer. I couldn't have worked on it at home. I couldn't have studied it in a scene study class. I just had to be there with these guys, with my cast, and it all panned out.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be back with more Krys Marshall.
Max Fun Drive 2022 starts in just 1 week.
Monday, April 25th.
We'll have exclusive Max Fun Drive gifts, awesome episodes, bonus content, and you know what else? You'll just have to tune in.
We have some tricks up our sleeve. Sleeves? Tricks? Is it plural?
We'll catch you next week, the greatest time to support the podcasts you love. Max Fun Drive starts on Monday, April 25th.
Don't miss it.
If you're sick of constantly arguing with the people closest to you about topics that really aren't going to change the world, we're here to take that stress off of your shoulders. We take care of it for you on We Got This with Mark and Hal.
That's right, Hal. If you have a subjective question that you want answered objectively once and for all time for all of the people of the world, questions like, who's the best Disney villain, Mac or PC? Or should you put ketchup on a hot dog? That's why we're here.
Yes, I get that these are the biggest questions of our time, and we're often joined by special guests like Nathan Fillion, Orlando Jones, and Paget Brewster. So let Mark and Hal take care of it for you on We Got This with Mark and Hal, weekly on Maximum Fun.
Welcome back to Feeling Seen. I'm your host, Jordan Crucchiola, and my co-host today is actor Krys Marshall. Let's get right back into our conversation. And now I read a bit from you, like I've heard you talk of, like, you know, dealing with the monster of imposter syndrome a bit.
Yeah, honey.
And then also talking about like how this has been on For All Mankind specifically. It's been a really collaborative environment for you to do your work. And I wondered how does that sort of the battle with imposter syndrome, how is that affected in one way or another by being in an environment that fosters that kind of collaboration? Like, do you find that, like, can you work around that more? Do you find ways to neutralize it, or is it sort of like, no, this is just a bitch that I'm just going to have to deal with, like, all the time?
I read a quote from Michelle Obama that essentially said, the interviewer asked her, what's it like to be in rooms and in conversations with these intelligent men who are heads of state and super powerful, you know, the leaders of the free world? And her response was, well, not a lot of them are all that intelligent. And so I think for me, there was such a feeling of I'm on the outside, they're on the inside. I remember, like, you know, working on shows in the past and just thinking to myself, this person who's number one on the call sheet, he has been given a gift by God. Okay. And I never got that gift. So my lot in life is to just be this supplemental character, and that's all I'll ever be. I really had a very limiting belief of what my abilities were. Even though I had, you know, studied and I'm a good actor, in my mind there was just this thought that some folks got it, some folks don't, and I don't. One thing that's been amazing with this process, with working on For All Mankind, is that I have to hand it to Ron Moore, who is our showrunner.
Ron Moore,
class
king
act
of
kind of guy.
Battlestar Galactica, the man who brought you the Outlander TV show, Ronald D. Moore. We appreciate you.
Ron's amazing. And he talked about that early on in the process in the table reads, just saying, you know, there's no space for ego here. There's no, kings and queens and all that sort. Like, we're all in this together. And he continued to reaffirm that. It's easy to just say it once and then later flip it. But he continued to reaffirm that. So it created an environment where I could email Ron and say, hey, I have a question about this. Can we talk about this scene? Or I could talk to Matt and Ben, who are our other showrunners, and say, hey, I actually don't think that this jives with who I imagine her to be. Can we discuss what your thoughts were on this? And so I got the chance to not just sort of show up and do my work and leave, but become a part of the creative process as a whole. So whether it's like how Danielle wears her hair or her makeup, or let's have a further discussion about wardrobe. In the scene, she's very guarded. I think she should be wearing long sleeves. The scene, she's in a casual home environment. I think she should be in shorts, whatever. But I think it is such a blessing as an actor to get the chance to play in this kind of world where the best ideas are lobbed up, and it doesn't matter who they come from.
Right.
And I see that happen all the time on set. I'll see, a lower level lighting technician, a grip, turn to the DP and say, hey, I think that we should maybe do this. And then it's glommed onto and we make adjustments. And I think that the ego is out of the way, and what matters most is to make great work.
The reason all of this connects back to the conversation about representation to me is because, as you were saying, talking about Annie Hall earlier, you're like, I'm not a 5'10" white woman. And, you're not a tiny Icelandic white woman in the case of Bjork.
Right.
Or a British white woman in the form of Kate Winslet. And, talking about feeling like these people, these leads, they got this gift that I don't have. I'm the supporting character, and that's what I'm the supporting role, and that's what I'm going to be. The ability to be a part of the authorship of your own role.
Yeah.
Even if you are in a literally supporting capacity, it allows you to be a part of a story that has been so out of the hands of women, black women, dark-skinned black women for so long, and be like, I am a part of now of writing this, not just bringing it to life through the lens of somebody else's imagination, regardless of what they may or may not know about my experience. And I wanted to talk about the empowerment of authorship in being intersectionally at a place where you're choosing between 5'10" white women a lot of the time, particularly growing up, these movies, all these important movies in college people are telling you to see. Imagine you're getting a lot of 5'10" white women to choose from.
Sure.
I don't know how that informs your desire to work in that capacity as author going forward and create those examples that aren't 5'10" white women for people now.
First of all, Jordan, again, fucking thank you. For a number of reasons. First of all, thank you for acknowledging that not only am I a black woman, but that I'm a dark-skinned black woman, because that in itself has a whole other host of expectations, judgments, prejudices against it that we could take another hour to talk about.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, that's part 2, guys.
Thank you for noticing. And thank you for not saying I don't see color, because I fucking hate when people say that. It's like,
I think it would
really.
It would.
Do you know the difference between tater tots and French fries? Cool, both potatoes. Different.
That's just one of the dumbest white people bullshit.
That don't do that. Yes. So when we're talking about representation and talking about my sort of authorship, growing up, like you mentioned with these movies that I picked today, the characters, the type of women that they played are the things that I responded to. But their visual aesthetic had nothing to do with me.
Totally.
And I think about other movies that I thought about mentioning, like, 500 Days of Summer.
Yeah.
And now these sort of cute, meet cute kind of interesting women movies. Very rarely, I really can't think of any that include women that look like me.
Right.
So often, if you are a black woman, or if you're a dark-skinned black woman, or even step further, a dark-skinned black woman with natural hair, you get to play a slave. Ooh, girl, you can play a slave, and that's all you'll play. And
here's your buffet of slave roles to play.
Come and get them.
Yeah.
So there is nothing wrong with playing a slave.
No.
But my experience every day living my experience growing up was an MTV experience.
Yeah.
It was a VH1 experience. Like, I grew up in mixed race communities. I went to liberal arts school. Like, I was exposed to Aaliyah as much as I was exposed to Nirvana. You know, like the music that I was steeped in, the environment that I came from is a truly like late 90s, early 2000s American experience.
Totally.
And so the movies that we're talking
you're
about.
listing off my experience.
Exactly. Right. You're wearing a Scream t-shirt right now. I love that movie when I was in school. So it is so unfortunate for me to have this experience, which is really deep and really rich and very much alive and not that different from, I'm sure, the upbringing of Blake Lively or anybody else who grew up in a middle-class family in America.
Yeah.
However, as a Black woman, I am exempted from that part of the conversation. I am told that I can either play a slave or I can play a strong Black woman, like Halle Berry in Losing Isaiah. Or I can maybe play a love interest, like Halle Berry and Boomerang. But the story that I'm talking about, the stories that I've resonated with that are a part of our conversation with Annie Hall and Clementine and Selma are weirdos and freaks and strange. And I mean, I'm really racking my brain to try to think of examples of that for Black women. And I think that there are so many Black actresses like Zoe Saldana and, Rosario Dawson who are incredible and who have dipped into those worlds. But I'm talking about the true, like Daria, right?
Yeah.
There just isn't a lot of that.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think that my work as an actor is, of course, paramount. That's why I'm here. That's why we're having this conversation. But I think my work as a Krys is to remind other little Black girls who look like me that it's okay to be like this. It's okay to like boys and girls or be pansexual. It's okay to talk white, whatever that even means, It's okay to like Nirvana and also like, SWV. Like, the world is broad and wide and outstretching, and Black women are not a monolith. We're not just one note. We aren't just strong. We aren't just determined. We aren't just Southern. And so one of the things I really love about playing Danielle Poole is her affinity for TV.
Yeah, she's a real TV enthusiast.
She's just a nerd, and one of her favorite shows is Bob Newhart. And she can, so it's like, then she's able to, both season 2 and season 3, she does it as well, where she quotes Star Trek every chance she gets. She's just a geek. There are Black Trekkies.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There are Black nerds. So that's my political platform, Black Nerd 2024. But it's important to me that there are representatives, and I remember, like, again, being young and seeing like Tracy Chapman and being like, oh wow, that's cool. She's doing this different. Like, she's a folk singer. I think there's definitely more of that sort of nuance in music, but I just wish that there was more in TV.
Well, and starting your career like around the mid-aughts, I am something of an informal like 2000s era historian, and what a wasteland of diversity.
Yeah,
is there? I want progress to match rhetoric, but I'm not in it. And I don't know. Is there a difference, at least in the variety of material you feel like you are presented with now for opportunities? Okay, you do.
Yes.
Oh, thank God.
Yes. I had done season 1, but we hadn't been picked up for season 2 yet.
Right.
And so I had an audition for Severance.
Oh,
and it was just one of the most groundbreaking scripts I had ever read. It was for the role of Helly. And so then once the show came out, it got delayed. But once the show came out and I saw the actress who played it, I was like, oh, she's perfect.
Yeah.
But Helly's a weirdo and she's sort of strange. And, I hope for your audience who hasn't seen the show, you guys should go and see Severance. Not just because I'm on an Apple show, but because Severance is just fucking amazing.
And it just got picked up for season 2.
So damn good.
You're investing in your past self and your future self.
So damn good. But yes, I think I've got really great representation, agents and managers who understand me intimately and are presenting me with roles that make sense for who I am internally, more so than just, oh, she fits this type. So yes. And then I think additionally, casting directors and studios are beginning to colorblind cast, which I even hate saying that phrase.
Right.
But they're starting to do that, and they're starting to say, okay, guess what? She is, emotionally bereft, or she is a cancer survivor, or she is a single mother. She could be any of these women. She could be Sandra Oh. She could be this. She could be that. And so I love seeing stories where it's not so linear. It's not like, oh, the husband is white, so then the wife is also white.
Yeah.
I'm seeing that. The other thing I think is a real plus is, in the last, really the last like 6 or 7 years, there's just been this deluge of streaming television.
God, yeah.
So I think some of the old norms of what makes a successful TV show were really codified by network TV. No shade to network TV, but it's a different formula.
Totally.
With streaming, and of course cable's been around forever, but with so many, not just Apple, but of course Amazon's got theirs, and Netflix and Hulu.
It's infinite.
There's too many to name
Roku
them all.
And Spectrum and
exactly. And then IMDb's got their own TV thing now. So there is so much out there that now there are more opportunities.
Yeah.
And so I think some of the classic choices maybe got gobbled up. And so now, because of a supply and demand situation, it's a damn supply chain that's getting us every time. But there are now more opportunities for everybody, which I think is great. But just reminding the world that stories can be told by so many different types of people.
Krys Marshall, thank you so much for joining us today. Is there anything you would like to send people off with, direct them to something, let them know about something?
The only thing I want to just leave off with is that you are infinitely smarter than I will ever be. So thank you for having this conversation with me. I feel like I've got pit sweat here, just trying to keep up with the genius in this room. And yeah, the only directive is just watch season 3, because if you liked the show before, you're going to freaking really like it. And the other thing I'll say is, don't get too attached to anybody. That's all I'll say.
Okay. On that brutal parting note, Krys Marshall, thank you for joining us today. This has been really fun.
Thanks, hon.
Thanks so much to Krys Marshall for that delightful conversation, which perhaps you could tell by the tremendous audio quality, we were able to record in person at Max Fun HQ, which is always such an exciting bonus in these pandemic-tinged times. The first 2 seasons, as you should now know, of For All Mankind are available on Apple TV Plus, and you have until June 10 to catch up all the way before season 3 starts. Okay, and now I've got that one quick thing before I go, and that one quick thing is about Robert Eggers' most recent film, now playing to some degree of wideness across the United States, The Northman, starring Alexander Skarsgård and Anya Taylor-Joy and Klaus Bang and Nicole Kidman, and thin as Gawker once described, I believe it was Kate Bosworth and I think Alexander Skarsgård as thin, tall people from thin, tall places. And I think that's an accurate description here. We have icy blondes abound in this, this movie is so goddamn metal. Robert Eggers, as you know, if you watch any of his work, The Witch, The Lighthouse, and now this, is a meticulous man. I once interviewed Robert Eggers about The Witch when that was coming out. He's brand new. He's doing the press rounds. He's talking to everybody. Talked to me at Wired. Absolutely no reason for him to be talking to Wired, but he made an hour and a half for me. It was wonderful. We talked about the production design specificity of what he was going for to reflect an accurate 1600s New England homestead that this family would be living in his movie. And he was so miffed. he was so miffed because I think almost the entire movie is done in natural light. He was so irritated with himself that in one scene around the dinner table, the family has to eat around a 3-wick candle to provide light for the room. And what was upsetting him about that was that 3-wick candles were not appropriate for the era, but he simply had to use one to provide enough light to shoot that scene. So that's how in the details Robert Eggers is getting. And he wrote The Northman with a co-writer named Sion. And this is a Viking tale of mysticism and revenge. This is about a young prince, Amleth, played by Alexander Skarsgård, whose father is slaughtered, Father Ethan Hawke, is slaughtered by a usurper, and he flees his small oceanside, like, little kingdom that he's the prince of because he needs to survive. He needs to survive, and he's got his Arya Stark kill list. He's going to avenge his father. He's going to kill the usurper. He's going to rescue his mom. And we cut to decades later, basically. And this guy has grown into the warrior nightmare that is Alexander Skarsgård. This is Skarsgård bigger than he ever was as the other Northman you famously know him as, Eric Northman, from the True Blood series. He's bigger than Eric Northman in this movie. And this movie, guys, this is bloody as hell. It's not like constant, but there's a lot of combat. There's a lot of fighting. And when it happens, it is like unsparingly savage. I won't say when or how it happens, but there's a moment when a knife goes into a man's face in this movie where the collective crowd reaction in a press screening, and press screenings are like famously buttoned up, like everybody's kind of reserving their reactions, and it's a bunch of jaded journalists, so they're pretty muted. People were like, oh my God, and like shifting in their seats. There was yelling. It was a reactive audience among a group of people that I can tell you are not traditionally reactive. It's also mystical and strange, and it is dirty, and it is muddy, and it is bloody, and it's so much fun. And if you liked the kind of like roguish down and dirtiness of The Lighthouse, but maybe you were like, I don't know, this roommate drama between Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson and whatever's going on with this seagull, this isn't really my thing, or maybe it's a little too esoteric, but like I respect what's going on here. If you were like, I just want some bloody knuckles and some broken bones and a guy prowling through the landscape to take vengeance for wrongs done to him, The Northman kicks ass. The Northman kicks ass, and it's a wonderful story. There's some narrative surprises. Anya Taylor-Joy, very cool as always. And there's a whole naked fight. There's a whole naked fight. Yeah, I'm not spoiling anything. You can kind of see it in the trailer. I'm not going to tell you where or when it happens. But, like, you know, I think we've all, since Eastern Promises, been waiting for some like gloves off, brawl for all, gritty battle in the nude with big strong men. It's happening here. It's happening now. It's happening in The Northman. So go check out this movie. I walked out of the press screening and I walked into the hallway of the theater just going, fuck yeah, fuck yeah, fuck yeah, fuck yeah. And that was how the movie made me feel. It's rock and roll, and I hope you guys like it. And join me on the other side on Twitter, and let's talk about it because I'm a fan. And that is our show for today. You can follow us on Twitter at FeelingSeenPod or join our Facebook group at www.facebook.com/groups/FeelingSeenPod. You can also send us an email at feelingseen@maximumfun.org. If you want to follow me, I'm Jorcru on Twitter. That's JORCRU. Our theme music is by Andrew Epen. The show is produced by Marissa Flaxbart. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher. And this is a production of Maximum Fun.
MaximumFun.org.
Comedy and culture.
Artist owned. Audience supported.